Hi everybody, my name is Grace Moore and my EdTech research paper is about technology for ELL students. ELL stands for English Language Learners, and I will be covering that a lot and repeating that a lot in my paper. And this is my cover page. And the beginning of my paper has an abstract, and it's just addressing what exactly I'm going to be talking about in my paper, and it's just about how the rise of population of immigrants from all over the world is changing the public school system drastically. And it just talks about what ELL students are, what we can do to help them, what we can do to facilitate their learning of English and their succeeding in the classroom, and how even though they might have a language barrier, it doesn't mean that they're not willing or capable to learn in a gen ed classroom. And so to actually start my paper, I put one of my favorite quotes from Nelson Mandela, and it says, "If you talk to a man in a language that he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to a man in his own language, that goes to his heart." And so I just really like that quote about it's just a nice way to put how people, even if they don't speak the same language, if they have something in common, that is a different way of communication that can just make a really big impact. So even if you're going to be a teacher and you don't know a different language, or you have ELL students in your classroom and you don't really know how to approach it, just knowing that you care and want to help them and are trying hard to help them, it speaks volumes. It really does. And it's just, sometimes language isn't really an issue when it comes to people knowing that you care. And so the introduction to my paper is just a little introduction about myself and about how I grew up in a third world country and my first language is Spanish, and how coming back to the States for my college education was very difficult. And even though I was fluent in English, I have been completely immersed in a Spanish-speaking country for over 12 years. And so being placed in somewhere that people only spoke English was so overwhelming. And I remember the first paper I had to write in college, I had to use Google Translate because I just couldn't figure out the words in my head that I wanted to put on the paper. And that just leads into the fact that if you can imagine a young child who's moved to the States, who knows barely any English, how they could feel. And it's a very scary and intimidating thing to not be able to communicate or learn properly. And it's difficult for everyone, but it is especially difficult for kids. And so to begin the information that I'm giving throughout this research paper, I talk about the 4 different types of English language learners. And there's English language learners, which is just a broad general term. And then there's ESL learners, which is English as a second language. And there's LEP learners, which is limited English proficiency. And I thought this was interesting because some students could have been born here and could know English, and English could be their only language, but they could be limited because of it could be they're behind academically, they don't have a really good home life, their parents don't really talk to them, so they don't really have that solid foundation of language. They don't know any language. And so I just thought that was interesting to see that you don't have to move here from a different country to not be proficient in English. And then the last one is ESOL, which is English as a second or other language. And I thought this was an important one to put in, just because you could have a student that comes in second, third grade and know 3 or 4 languages. They don't know them very well, but they know them because maybe their family members are from different countries, maybe their parents got married and are both from different countries, or they live with their grandparents who speak a completely different language than they do. And that is quoting my teacher, Jan Webler, in our Planning for Diverse Learners class that I had in the spring. And this was just from the notes that she has given us. And then my next paragraph is talking about how to first assess a student that is ELL and how you know that they're ELL. And it's doing a home language survey, and you use this and determine what their language is at home, because whatever their language is at home is their first language. And that'll just help you know where they're at and how you can help them. And then there are 5 levels of assessment. There's level 1, which is pre-functional. There's level 2, which is beginning. Level 3, intermediate. Level 4, advanced. And level 5, which is the final level, is proficient. And I would go through it, but that's just a lot of information, and so I'm just giving you the levels right now. The guidelines for identifications, those are our goals as educators, is to help ELL students that enter our classroom until they exit our classroom, in facilitating them moving up in the levels and being able to pass their assessments and their tests. For ELL students, there are 2 different types of language skills that they need in order to succeed academically. We have BICS, which is basic interpersonal communication skills, and CALP, which is cognitive language, academic language proficiency. The BICS is a language skill that refers to social interaction and conversation, where CALP refers to formal academic language and learning and that is needed to comprehend text and presentations during class. And that is another thing that I am citing from my Professor Jan Webler. And so, as I go on in the paper, it talks about the tests that ELL students need to take to be able to know where they are in their English learning. And so, research shows that it takes more than 5 years for the average child to acquire a new language well enough to be able to succeed in school. And so the ELL students are tested and assessed to see if they're proficient or not by the ELPA, which is the English Language Proficiency Assessment, and the TELA, the Test of English Language Acquisition. And these assessments and tests, they model and they have their modes of speaking, listening, reading, and writing, all the things that students need to be successful in their education and their academic career. And students, to be able to pass this test, must have a complete score in all of the areas of a level 5 or a level 4. These tests are done annually, and you can't exit out of them until you're past 3rd grade, just so that they know you'll have the highest results. And then the next part of my paper is talking about how the population in the United States is changing. And over the past 3 decades, nearly 30 million immigrants from all over the world, both authorized and unauthorized, have settled here seeking a better future for themselves and their children. And so that's just a small look into how much it's changed and how many people are actually here that English isn't their first language. And 10% of the American classroom is English language learners, and less than 1% of teachers are English language instructors. So that's a really big difference. And as I keep going down, it's where we enter into how technology helps ELL students and how it facilitates them learning English. And so ELL students benefit from reinforcement of vocabulary and concepts through pictures, graphics, and videos. Visual aids are always important when it comes to students who don't know English. It's so necessary because they understand pictures, they can tell you what objects are, and they know what objects are, so visuals are key. And combining visuals with games, with apps that you find, or you could use as well, like a smartboard lesson that has both English and Spanish. Just there are so many things that you can use, and even if your school's on a really low budget, there are so many free apps and free like online games that you can use that will help your students. So, you know, as teachers, free is always the best thing, and so that shouldn't ever be an obstacle, because there's always more and more apps and websites and educational games that come up every day, and they help all levels and different types of learners, especially ELL students. And so that is where my infographic comes in, And I've created for you, the name of my infographic is Technology for ELL Students. 10 modern day tools for the modern day classroom. And so here I have just the statistic that 10% of the American classroom is ELL students, which is roughly 5 million students. And then I just have a little thing that quote that technology is a wonderful asset for both teachers and students and facilitates learning. So my first app is Rosetta Stone Kids. This Rosetta Stone Kids is designed for kids ages 3 to 4, and then it has a little description of what it is used for. And then I have Duolingo, and this is a fun addition to testing students in the classroom. So it helps them with conversation, vocabulary, speaking, and listening. And then I have Memrise, which is used to help students remember words and their meaning. And it has over 13 pages of different things that they can do. And then the next ones I have is Flashcardlet by Quizlet, which is an app that allows you to make the flashcards, and they can just get them off their iPad and access them whenever you want them to, over whatever subject you want. And then I have Words with Kids, which is a game that integrates cultural integration into the classroom, and it helps students play together and against each other. So it kind of adds into the teamwork, and students who aren't ELL can help students that are, and it's just a way to collaborate together. And then I have Fun English by StudyCap, and this has over 10 different games for English language learners, and it helps young ELL students with pronunciation and spelling. And then number 7 is English Burst High Flyers, and this is a game where students learn new vocabulary, starting with numbers and everyday objects. So it starts out easy and it just builds up. And then Futaba is it's an app, but it's a game from 1 to 4 players, and it presents pictures of everyday items, and the student has to name the items. And Kid Vocab by MindSnacks is a literacy app for all students, and it's great for ELL students. It introduces students to Tier 3 low-frequency, context-specific vocabulary, so that's always really good. And then the last one I put in is Heads Up. This isn't actually an educational app. It's a game, but it could be so helpful because it helps the students build confidence. It helps encourage their vocabulary. It helps them have to think of adjectives, synonyms, antonyms to describe the word without actually saying the word. And then to finish and end my paper, I have a little quote and sentence. The sentence says, "It's important to understand how students acquire a new language in order to appreciate the significance that technology can have in ensuring success for ELL students." And then my quote by Linda Ellerby, which is a journalist and television producer, it says, "In the 21st century, the century our children live in, the century that they will, in fact, shape, media literacy will no longer be a luxury, it will be a necessity." So that just goes to show you that technology is necessary in a modern day for everything, and not having technology in your classroom or giving it to your children to experiment with, to use, to familiarize with, is actually hindering their learning and hindering their success in and out of school. And so that's just really important, and it just brings it all together how important technology really is in the classroom, especially for those teachers who really don't like using it. It's very critical. And then my last page is my sources, websites, and a link to the infographic that I made in its actual website. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.